If you pay close attention, you'll notice something unfolding beneath the surface of the global economy. Something most people aren't seeing yet. This isn't a dramatic forecast or a fear-driven narrative. It's the natural outcome of forces that have been building for years. We are moving toward a period where money, as most people understand it, may begin losing value at a faster and more destabilizing pace. And the people most exposed are not speculators or high-risk investors. It's ordinary Americans, especially those between 40 and 80 years old, who spent decades doing what they were told was responsible. They worked, saved, invested conservatively, trusted institutions, and assumed the system that rewarded them would remain stable. History suggests otherwise. Periods of major economic transition almost always catch the majority off guard, not because the warning signs were invisible, but because it feels safer to believe that what has always worked will continue working. Stability creates comfort, and comfort dulls awareness. Today, that pattern is repeating. To understand why 2026 could represent a critical inflection point, we need to step back and look at how monetary systems actually behave over time. The history of money is not a straight line. It is cyclical. Over the last 500 years, every major global reserve currency has eventually lost its dominant status. The Venetian ducat, the Dutch guilder, the British pound, each followed the same arc. First, there is ascent. A nation gains an edge through trade, innovation, resources, or military power. Its currency becomes widely accepted. Then comes stability. For decades, sometimes centuries, that currency anchors global commerce. Finally, pressures accumulate, debt expands, productivity slows relative to competitors, confidence erodes, and eventually a new monetary order emerges. Today, the US dollar occupies a position remarkably similar to where the British pound stood in the early 20th century. Still dominant, still trusted, but facing mounting structural pressures. If you understand incentives, you understand behavior. And right now, global incentives are aligned in ways that favor meaningful changes to the existing monetary system. Consider the fundamentals. U.S. national debt has exceeded $33 trillion, more than 120% of GDP. Historically, this level has often preceded confidence crises. Interest payments alone now consume over 15% of all federal tax revenue. As interest rates rise, that burden only increases. At the same time, major economies, including China and Russia, are actively reducing their reliance on the US dollar for international trade. This doesn't signal an immediate collapse, but it does signal a transition toward a more fragmented, uncertain monetary environment. To understand why this matters, you must understand how money derives its value. Money has no intrinsic worth. A dollar bill is just paper. Its value exists entirely because people collectively believe it can be exchanged for real goods and services. That belief rests on three pillars: political stability, fiscal discipline, and economic productivity. People must trust that the issuing government will remain stable. They must believe that debt and spending are under control. And they must believe the economy produces real value sufficient to justify the money supply. When even one of these pillars weakens, confidence erodes, and when confidence erodes, the purchasing power of money declines, often suddenly. Currency crises rarely unfold smoothly. Economists call the tipping point a Minsky moment. Pressure builds quietly for years like water behind a dam. Small cracks appear, but the structure holds until it doesn't. When the break comes, it's abrupt. If you examine current data honestly, the pressure is clearly building. Inflation, even when temporarily restrained, has already demonstrated how quickly monetary stability can unravel. During the pandemic, central banks printed unprecedented amounts of money to prevent economic collapse. That money didn't vanish. It remains in the system, creating pressures that have yet to fully express themselves. At the same time, political polarization in the United States has reached levels unseen since the Civil War. The government's ability to make difficult fiscal decisions is increasingly questioned by global investors. History offers clear examples of what happens when monetary confidence breaks. Argentina in the late 1990s artificially pegged its peso to the US dollar. For years, stability appeared intact. Middle-class families saved diligently, trusting the system. Then in 2001, the peg collapsed. Overnight, savings lost more than 70% of their real value. This wasn't caused by recklessness. It was caused by trust. Turkey offers another lesson. Between 2013 and 2021, the lira lost over 80% of its value. Families who kept all their savings in local currency saw purchasing power evaporate. Those who diversified, holding foreign currencies and real assets, fared far better. Even developed nations are not immune. In 1967, Britain devalued the pound by 14% overnight. Families holding only pounds lost instantly. Those diversified were protected. The lesson is not that the US dollar will collapse tomorrow. The lesson is that no currency is immune to economic reality. Now let's translate these historical patterns into practical reality. Specifically for Americans approaching or living in retirement. Imagine you're 50 years old with $500,000 in savings, held primarily in bank accounts, CDs, and government bonds. These aren't bad assets. The risk isn't quality. The risk is concentration. Every dollar is exposed to the same currency system. Now consider a plausible scenario. Between 2025 and 2026, fiscal and geopolitical pressures lead to a 20-30% decline in the dollar's relative value. Not a collapse, just a significant adjustment. At first glance, that might seem abstract. But in a globalized economy, purchasing power touches everything. Energy costs reflect global oil markets. Medications are produced overseas. Food depends on imported fertilizers. Electronics rely on foreign semiconductors. Healthcare equipment is globally sourced. Even if your bank balance looks unchanged, your standard of living quietly erodes. And if you're nearing retirement, time is your most limited asset. You don't have decades to recover. This is not an argument for panic. It's an argument for preparation. History shows that the only truly effective defense against monetary instability is intelligent diversification. Not the traditional 60-40 portfolio, but diversification across value systems. First, currency diversification. Holding a portion of savings in currencies backed by stronger fiscal discipline, such as the Swiss franc, Canadian dollar, or even the euro, can reduce reliance on a single monetary system. Second, precious metals. Gold is not an investment, it's insurance. For over 2,000 years, gold has preserved purchasing power through wars, collapses, and regime changes. Silver, though more volatile, often follows gold and can be practical for smaller allocations. A 5-10% allocation to physical metals, not paper substitutes, can provide critical protection. Third, real assets. Well-located real estate, farmland, infrastructure, and even collectibles preserve value because they have intrinsic utility. People need shelter, food, and energy regardless of currency systems. Fourth, multinational companies. Businesses generating revenue across multiple currencies and producing essential goods offer natural hedges against localized currency weakness. Finally, selective exposure to cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin in particular was designed with limited supply. This doesn't make it a replacement for traditional assets, but a 2-5% allocation can hedge against extreme monetary outcomes. The key is discipline and gradualism. Sudden moves invite mistakes. Transition over 12-18 months. Learn as you adjust. There's a difference between pessimism and preparation. Pessimism assumes disaster is inevitable. Preparation assumes change is inevitable and responds rationally. History teaches that periods of greatest uncertainty often coincide with the greatest opportunities. When old systems weaken, new ones emerge. Those who prepare don't just survive, they often prosper. This isn't about predicting the future perfectly. It's about acknowledging risk honestly. Concentrating all savings in one currency during a period of growing pressure is itself a gamble. True wealth protection comes from readiness. The situation will change. It always does. The only question is whether you'll be prepared when it does.